It's time for Pac-12 play. The Beavers kick off the conference slate against Washington State on the Palouse. Last season, Oregon State almost pulled off the upset. What will it take for them to finish the job? Go Beavs starts now. A tough test ahead for Oregon State at Martin Stadium as they get ready to take on the high-flying top 25 Cougars. Welcome into Go Beavs, Amanda Maynard, Lindsay Schnell of USA Today, our defensive expert, Jason John Baptiste. We're going to be handing out our emojis for the coaching staff. If you saw Talking Beavers, we're on an emoji theme this week. And we're also going to be sitting down with the analyst for the game, Anthony Herron, to find out what he thinks the Beavers need to do to disrupt this very difficult Cougars offense. But of course, turning things back to the Beavers, 1-2 heading into conference play. Obviously, things didn't go as planned against Minnesota. A little bit of a disappointing loss. Yeah. What do you feel like the mood of this team is right now?
I feel like they're 0-3 because they barely beat Portland State. I just think it's bad. You know, it's going to take a lot for them to not completely crumble mentally this week. Fortunately, they have a bye next week, so hopefully they can regroup a little. But I think they're just in a bad place. I think fans are mad. I don't know if administrators are feeling the heat or upset also, but it's bad. And now you're going up to a school that, you know, that was a big win for them last week over Boise State to come back, and was it double or triple overtime?
Yep.
Yeah.
They're going to be flying high.
Yeah, I think, you know, the fan base has a reason to be, you know, frustrated and angered, you know, because you have yet to play a good game. You know, in 3 games so far this year, which is all that you have on your resume right now is the 3 games, you have yet to play a good game against Colorado State. You have a good Portland State, which was a D1 AA school, and now again against Minnesota. So it's a big issue. They still have no identity on the offensive side. They still can't stop anybody on the defensive side. They have, you know, good series here and there, good half. It was a good defensive half for Oregon State in the first half, but you know, second half they got too tired. The offensive, you know, play calling, and the offense couldn't move the ball, so they got tired, and you know, the floodgates were open. So it's disconcerting for sure.
I feel like they're in a position right now where it doesn't really matter who the opponent is, what the opponent runs.
Yes.
This is all about them. I mean, when Jordan Villeman, who didn't show up most of 2016, is in postgame calling out his teammates for not being ready to go, I was like, first of all, the height of irony. Second of all, like, this is a problem. Just in general, like, I mean, how are you not? I thought they showed incredible mettle and toughness in the first half, you know, to come back.
Yeah.
And then that, like,
and I mean, I can't get past the fact that for a team that is supposed to be, you know, tough-minded, tough, physically, you know, showing their presence, they haven't done that. Like, you know, Law runs the balls. Yeah, I mean, they just, you know, they can't handle any adversity right now. The slightest bit of adversity, they crumble. Which, to me, if you're tough-minded and you're a tough, you know, team and a tough player, you don't wilter. You don't crumble under adversity. You look for adversity.
Okay, well, I know that the coaching staff has been taking some heat, so we're going to be giving out our emojis for the coaching staff this week. Lindsay, what is your emoji to describe how you're feeling about this group? Money.
Okay, this would have been more fun if Jason and I hadn't texted about this ahead of time. We could have guessed each other's. So this is in regards to their contract, as in they're being paid a lot of money.
Very creative.
Oregon State cannot afford to buy them out.
Yes.
But also that they need to be worth this money.
Yes. And going along with that theme, here you have suitcases being packed or needing to be packed because they need to be held accountable. These coaches that are being paid all this money and are supposed to come up with schemes and, you know, be able to put these players in the right positions and most of all develop these players, and that's not happening. So they need to be held accountable.
Amanda, what's yours?
Mine is a detective woman. Because I don't know what's going on. It's very confusing. I want to get to the bottom of this. Right. I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about on Wednesday's show where, you know, there's a lot of pieces. There were so many high hopes for this team this year. You have Ryan Nall. It doesn't feel like they're utilizing him very much. What's going on? So I want to get to the bottom of this. But my question to you is, do you feel like, I mean, Gary Anderson kind of put them on the hot seat his assistant coaches, or at least kind of put some pressure, I felt like, in the media this week. Do you get the sense that if they don't play very well against Washington State, do you see any big changes being made, or is this just going to be the same story all year?
So we've actually discussed this, like, off camera, and I think it's very hard to replace a coordinator, whether it's a defensive or offensive coordinator mid-season. But with how badly they've been playing, I think it's almost needed. Something needs to be shaken up within the organization, somewhere within that coaching staff, in order for there to be any movement. Because there's literally no movement right now, offensively or defensively. So something needs to happen.
What's the point of keeping it the same?
Exactly.
To piggyback off that, number one, they cannot switch offensive coordinators again. They're on their third one already. Like, no way. You need some sort of continuity there. Number two, these are Anderson's guys, Clune is his boy. It's hard for me to imagine, but as someone else pointed out to me, he's not a patient man, Gary Anderson, so I'm not sure. But to me, the bigger question is this. Anderson said this week, we know that our system works. We've been here before. Well, no, he hasn't.
No.
The third year was different at Utah State. And at Wisconsin, it was completely different. Again, those were someone else's recruits. After the Minnesota loss in the press conference, I felt that Anderson just was like, shell-shocked almost, like doesn't really know what to do. So I'm curious how he's managing this. I'm really fascinated by who is he reaching out to, who's he talking to, because I think that this is new territory for him. And I will say that, like, while a lot of people would get frustrated with Mike Riley a lot of the time, and I understand why, he knew how to deal with these type of things.
Uncharted waters.
And one of the biggest matchups I can imagine to watch this weekend is going to be the passing game versus the secondary here, which is majorly hurting. We're going to take a look at the injury list for this weekend. So they have no Dwayne Williams, no Xavier Crawford. Williams is out for the season. Jalen Moore was also ejected last week for targeting. He's going to sit in the first half of this one. I can't imagine there is
Xavier Crawford hasn't been playing.
A worse time to have totally new faces in the secondary. I mean, how do you see this shaking out?
Well, it's not going to shake out too well. I can tell you that. I mean, it's a mixed match of people that they're throwing out there. But the one bright star to me, especially in the Minnesota game, was Morris. Morris, the freshman.
Totally.
He played amazing. I mean, granted,
and maybe it's because he had, you don't know any better.
Sure, just go out.
So that can be an advantage going in to Washington State.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the kid had like 16 tackles, which is the most tackles of any Oregon State player since Lance Mitchell.
Really?
I thought you were going to say yourself.
Huh? What's that?
I thought you were going to say yourself.
No. Defensive linemen don't get tackles like that.
I know, but it would have been funnier.
It would have been, it would have been. So I mean, the kid is a baller. I think he's a bright star in a place in an area where there's not too many bright stars right now. So.
All right. Well, a little later in the show, Gary Anderson, like we mentioned, he put some heat on those assistants. We're getting Mike Parker's take on that. And then coming up after the break, we're getting the national perception of why Oregon State has been struggling as we sit down with the announcer calling the game. Welcome back. Anthony Herron is part of the broadcast crew calling Saturday's game up in Pullman. He is joining us now from his home in Chicago to talk about this weekend's matchup. So, Anthony, at last check, Oregon State Washington State was between 16-point favorites, 21-point favorites, and some betting lines. What do you expect this weekend?
I think the game's going to be more competitive than a lot of folks anticipated, Amanda, because when you look at last year's game, Oregon State was able to come out, dominate Washington State on the ground, and as effective as the Cougs defense is at making big plays, one of the things with all the bodies that they tend to run towards the line of scrimmage defensively, one of the things that ends up doing is if you have too many people within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage on certain snaps, then you can end up having a really big play. So one of their running backs, Ryan Nall, he had an 89-yard touchdown run last season. It's not only because he's big and fast, it's also because Washington State tends to bring a lot of bodies towards the line of scrimmage. They're on a very aggressive and assertive angle moving forward. And so if you can actually break that initial line of defense, it can lead to a lot of big plays. And in talking to Gary Anderson so far this week, my sense is that Oregon State is going to get back to trying to be a run-first outfit as much as they like what Jake Luton's been able to do. They recognize that their personnel through 3 games suits the willingness, the ability, the want to run the football. So I think we're going to see Oregon State try to dominate along the ground a bit more.
What are some of the things that you think have to go their way in order for them to do that? Because I know that Gary has talked about, wanting it to be a 60-40 mix. Like you mentioned, they have the personnel, and this was supposed to be kind of their bread and butter. What do you feel like they have to get going there, or what do they need to do to get it going?
We saw it a bit last week, because what can happen when you're able to really control the game on the ground, it can still set up some of these play action passing opportunities. I think through 3 games, we've seen Jake Luton get a little bit more comfortable with how they operate offensively, and his ability to complete the deep pass, we've seen that on display, very strong arm, but decision making is something that's going to be a big key for them against the Washington State defense that their defensive coordinator loves to take the football away. I mean, Alex Grinch has been one of the better minds in college football at condensing his team that defensively, the ball doesn't belong to the offense. It belongs to us on the defensive side. So Washington State has the ability to take the football away. Decision making is going to be huge for Jake Luton in this game. So the more effective they can be in running the football early on, he's still going to have his opportunities for some big passing plays, but I think he's going to need to come off of play action. Some of the ball handling in the backfield, once you establish a ground attack early, and see if you can hit Billy Trot over the top.
What is your perception of Jake Luton through 3 games? I know he's still trying to feel his way in this offense, but like you mentioned, he's had kind of flashes where it's like, okay, he could be pretty good.
He's got arm talent. He's got a very strong arm, and the ability to throw it deep, that's something that hasn't necessarily been a part of Oregon State's offense under Gary Anderson until this season. So they've been really excited about that. It seemed to me like early on, maybe they allowed a little bit too much latitude to how much volume they try to have in the passing game. But part of that is when you end up, trailing in certain games, and that can skew the numbers a bit also. But I've been impressed with his resolve as much as anything. And part of that comes from the example that Darryl Garrettson, oddly enough, his backup quarterback, the guy he beat out for the job. Darryl Garrettson has been at multiple stops at Utah State and now Oregon State. And he's always been a guy who plays with a hard edge, who plays with a lot of resolve. And he's trying to take a bit of that leadership role in the meeting room and on the practice field. I feel like that example from a guy like Garrettson is something that's been rubbing off more effectively on Jake Luton. And even when the moments in games have gone bad, and we haven't seen a lot of moments of him on the sideline, hasn't been getting down on his teammates or down on himself. So some of those intangibles that I've seen from Jake Luton, to me, give me confidence that I think this offense is really going to start to click more.
So much focus on this air raid offense for Washington State, but they also have a lot of great defensive players. What for you is going to be the matchup to watch this weekend?
Oh, it's got to be on the interior. When you look at what Washington State's able to do in their defensive front, they've got a guy named Hercules Mata'a.
That says it all, right?
Yes, he's named Hercules, and it's with good reason. He's one of the better pass rushers, one of the better penetrators in the Pac-12 conference, and his ability to get into the backfield, I think, is really what pays dividends for Washington State. So the matchup on the interior between him and Gus Lavaka on the inside.
So this week we were talking a little bit about our panic meter and fans' panic meter when it comes to the Beavers. What is kind of the national perception, especially around the Pac-12, of what's going on with this team and if they can turn things around this season?
Well, I'd say right now there's a little bit of surprise because Gary Anderson is highly respected as a coach, and what he did at Utah State, what he did at Wisconsin, and now coming to Oregon State. And so being a few years in at this point, there was an expectation that maybe 3 games into the season, 1 and 2 wouldn't be the record. And even if it was, their 2 losses wouldn't be to the extent, where teams have been able to pull away from them in the second half. So the national perception and even this perception within the Pac-12 community has been more so that a level of surprise with how Oregon State has started the season out. But what we did see down the stretch last year, and my sense is once more of these new players get really ingrained in the system, still a fairly young team that Oregon State has, Gary Anderson has no quit in him. He or his coordinators, they're going to continue to try to ingrain what the tenets of his program are. I believe week by week, we'll see more of who this team truly is, especially now that I think there's going to be a renewed focus on leading with the ground attack, maybe even situationally being stubborn with running the football.
So you're a defensive guy. This team has given up 106 points over 3 games. What needs to change for the Beavers?
Tackling. They really
Back to basics.
It really is, because they've been in position to make plays quite often, but they've just been missing a lot of tackles. It's about a lot of it is about the pursuit angles, the way you get population around the ball carrier. And something that tends to happen at times is once the opponent gets a drive going and you get a few plays into it, then the defense gets a bit worn down. And as opposed to when you evaluate the film, as opposed to having 4 or 5 bodies around the ball carrier, then what happens, you only get 1 or 2 bodies around the ball carrier. So something that maybe is close to a first down becomes a definitive first down. And then those first downs turn into long touchdowns. You give up more explosive plays. So tackling, the angles that you're pursuing to achieve those tackles, and then how many people you actually get around the football, that's going to be a huge key, because there's no reason a true freshman safety should be leading the team in tackles like the 17 that were there last week for Moore when he was on the field. But overall, if you can actually have the more bodies you can get around ball carriers, whether you're facing a running team or a passing team, that's going to lead to the most results to consistently get ball carriers on the ground.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Good luck on the call this weekend.
Appreciate it, Amanda. 2:30 Pacific on the Pac-12 Network. Looking forward to it.
Big honors last night for 2 former Beaver greats. We'll discuss their legacies at Oregon State. And after the break, a big star possibly returning for Oregon State. We'll explain. Time now for our Cedar TV and Appliance headlines with our resident reporter, Lindsay Schnell. And this first one is some positive news for a change.
Maybe positive news. There's quite a bit of bad news on the injury front right now for the Beavers. Their secondary is really banged up. It's going to look really different against Washington State. But fingers crossed, Seth Collins might be coming back.
Okay.
Now, give everyone a little refresher. Seth Collins initially comes here as a quarterback. They move him to receiver. In 2016, he is the second best receiver for the Beavers. 36 catches, 418 yards, 1 touchdown. Missed the last 2 games of 2016 with a severe illness, so we haven't seen him forever. He's been injured. He's been out the last couple weeks because he has an injured finger. But, you know, thinking about it, been thinking a lot this week about what Nigel likes to say about him. You know, he's a junkyard dog. And I actually saw Seth last week after the Minnesota game, and he walked out of the locker room and he looked furious. And I thought, that's a good thing. They need that type of anger.
I was going to say, how much can he impact this offense?
He's a threat. That's the biggest thing. They have to respect him in the vertical passing game. So that can be huge. I don't know how much he's really going to be able to do. We don't get to see practice as much anymore. So we're not sure how, you know, is he at 100% yet? I won't be shocked if he sits because they have a bye after this. But this is good news.
Second headline, all about the unique character that is Mike Leach.
Is Mike Leach playing head games? Okay, this is totally Mike Leach, right? He is the most interesting man in college football. He's also kind of crazy. And he's known for calling his team out. He has no problem when they are not playing well, telling them and telling the media that this week, Seattle Times reporter Stephanie Lowe told the Oregonian that she thought that Leach saying some negative stuff about his offensive line was really just him challenging them because they've had some trouble. They have not been able to establish the deep passing game, which is obviously huge in the air raid offense. So curious to see what the offensive line plays like this week, and then what Leach says afterward, win or lose.
Well, and like you mentioned, this is something that it seems like he does every season to a different group.
Right.
Do you feel like that tactic works for him?
You know, it does. I've talked to quite a few people who have played for Leach like years ago, and going back to Texas Tech. And one thing that a lot of them have said to me is he's really good at getting guys together, even if getting them together involves everyone coming together because they don't like him.
Yeah.
But if it's a tactic and it works, the strategy is, you know, something you should go back to.
It's kind of like Bill Belichick. I've heard a lot of guys that played for him. They're afraid of him, so it works for them. Okay, number 3, Luke Falk. He is going to be a tough one.
Whew, an OSU giant killer, Amanda. This kid, 3 wins over the Beavers, has totaled, are you ready for this? 1,293 yards, 16 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, and completed 74% of his passes. This includes last year when the Beavers were up 24-6 at halftime. Falk comes in the third quarter, 10 for 11 passing, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. This kid has all the confidence in the world against the Oregon State defense. That could mean bad news. But he was benched last week against Boise State. So Mike Leach said that he is absolutely going to be the guy this week, but, you know, I think he might be on a little bit of a short leash. He's supremely talented, former walk-on, but keep your eye on him. He knows how to beat this Beaver defense.
Beavers defense certainly going to need to get some pass rush. We're going to take a look at their lack of getting a pass rush over the past few games with Jason, and also what's going on with the running back situation. This was supposed to be the bread and butter, and now it has been a task to get it going. How they can change that, coming up next. Two Oregon State greats honored in Cincinnati last night, Chad Johnson and TJ, what is it, Lindsay? Houshmandzadeh. It is part of the Bengals' 50th anniversary celebration. Johnson has the third most catches in franchise history. And Jason, you have a good Chad Johnson story, right? He was right before you.
So I will never forget this. Chad actually graduated, was a couple years ahead of me. But for my recruiting trip, it was right before they played Notre Dame, and I'll never forget. It was just a typical practice, and Chad is clowning around as usual, as per Chad. And some of us recruits started making fun of him because he wasn't making any plays during practice. You know, balls were being thrown at him, and he wasn't catching them. So all of a sudden, he's like, okay, you guys really want me to make a play, huh? You guys really want me to make a play? And at that time, the secondary was stellar for Oregon State. So the very next play, he, bomb from Jonathan Smith.
Yeah.
He catches like a 70-yard touchdown pass from Jonathan Smith. And he's like, okay, now that's
a play.
That's how you play. And ever since then, I was like, okay, yeah, they're going to blow out.
Yeah, you went, right?
So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Again, I had to stop myself from calling him Ocho Cinco because I can never keep track of where
I'm sure
he is now in his life, right?
Ocho Cinco, yeah.
Ocho Cinco never gets old,
Ocho
right?
Cinco, Johnson,
Right?
I'll see.
All right, well, turning back to tomorrow's game in our Toyota opponent preview, Washington State, very tall task. Now, last season, the Beavers made this a game, built a first half 21-3 lead before obviously Washington State came back in the second half. What is the matchup you think is the Beavers can give them the most trouble tomorrow?
I think with the wide receivers. I mean, the Beaver wide receivers are big guys. I mean, they're 6'4", 6'2". If Seth Collins ends up playing, he's another 6'2" receiver. The defenders for Wazoo, their cornerbacks are 5'10". They're miniature. So they could definitely, win the one-on-one battles with them, jump ball situations, things of that sort. So they could take full advantage of their secondary. You just have to have the time in order to throw the ball.
In the spirit of picking something different and am attempting to be an optimist, I said Oregon State's defensive line against Washington State's offensive line. Washington State's offensive line has not been very good so far this season. And also last year when Oregon State built that big lead, important thing to remember, Luke Falk got hit really, really hard. That implies to me that maybe Oregon State remembers how to do that. And that's part of why Falk did not play well the first half. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but.
So you said, trying to be an optimist. You're really being optimistic here. I mean.
They have a 370-pound guard.
Yeah,
I want to know, especially for a defensive guy, I feel like you need 5 people to go up against him.
And the issue with them is that they have not had any pressure up the middle. So how are you going to get pressure up the middle and you have a 370-pound guard there and you haven't been able to do it in the last 3 games? So I mean, it's going to be pretty hard for them to get any pressure up there.
What do you do with somebody again that's that big and that much bigger than? Okay.
Speed. You beat him with speed.
Yep.
I mean, you can't overpower him. He's too big. So you have to beat him with speed. You have to use your quickness in order to get by him. Now, whether or not they're able to do that, we'll see. But that's how you beat him, is with speed.
But Ryan Nall had a great game last year when they played him. So that obviously I can imagine will be a key tomorrow. But just 7 carries in this last one. Art Pierce starting. I know Gary Anderson said he wanted to get the perimeter running game going. What is kind of going on with the run game that you see here? And is it working? Is it not?
It's not really working. They're not opening up any holes, especially up the middle. So I think that's the reason why they really wanted to give Pierce an opportunity to try and get to the edge against Minnesota. In actuality, it was working in the first quarter. They were able to get to the edge a couple times. But especially between the center and the guard, they still don't have a stout center. I mean, Delp and Houston, they're still trying to figure out who's going to be the starting center, who's going to help try to transition them into that starting role. So I don't know. I mean, I don't see that really changing much. Even if Ryan does get the ball a little bit more, I don't really see him gaining that many more yards up the middle.
Evanston brought this up when we were talking off camera after the game that, Nall needs a line to open up holes for him. As strong as he is and as much as he loves to drag tackler, he's not going to be able to like sidestep someone, whereas Pierce has that type of foot speed. But I also think that Nall is, everyone knows what he's going to do. He's been carrying a really heavy load for a long time. I think his body is just kind of taking some beatings, and I wonder how much that's hurting. And then, as we talked about, everyone knows that that's what they're good at, so they're going to try to stop him.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, do you feel like they will go back to Nall at any point? As far as, it's like Gary, we talked about this on Wednesday's show, that Gary Anderson comes out and says, hey, he's our workhorse. We're giving him the ball all the time. This is what's happening. And then McGibbon comes out and says, well, no, we're not going to do that. We're spreading the ball around
This is like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So sounds like not on the same page in our most recent season.
I mean, there's definitely some confusion going on there. I think, this game they will have to get on the same page because they need to keep the ball away from that potent Wazoo offense. So I think they will try to get the ball to Nall a little bit more, try to, beat down the Wazoo defenders. Intermittently try to get in AP and Tyner in order so that they
if he can play.
Sure.
Things are giving him problems again. The other thing is Nall has fumbled twice so far this season. That's a little unusual. It's weird. Like in the days that I covered the Beavers, the Quiz was there. Quiz never fumbled. Literally in his entire career, I believe he only fumbled once. But I think that Ryan is having some ball security issues, which is probably making him hesitant too.
I know first and second half have been a major struggle. They've been outscored 88-28, and we obviously saw this against Minnesota, playing great, and then for some reason the third quarter just coming out flat. What do you see going on between the first and second halves?
What's going on in the locker room is what I want to know.
No, seriously. I mean, there's obviously some issues there. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So, they're either, and it's not even, schematically that they're changing all that much from one half to the other. It's just that these players aren't playing come the second half. Defensively, I could tell you from this last game that the players just got tired. I mean, when the offensive...
when the offense is turning the ball over all the time.
In your own red zone. And, I mean, for the first, I think, and I might be quoted as being wrong here, but for the first 6 drives, they had 2 turnovers and had, I think, 3 and outs. I mean, you can't do that and expect the defense to be able to sustain that long.
Especially when the defense is already pretty thin, depth-wise.
Exactly.
They don't have a ton of bodies right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Gary Anderson putting public pressure on his assistant coaches this week. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We're sitting down with Mike Parker to discuss.
That's on me, like I always say. It's not on those kids. I'm the one that hired the coaches, so that's all on me. So we'll keep battling, we'll keep fighting. What can I say? The football team is not playing well, and it's a football team I'm in charge of. So I understand it. I get it.
So some strong words for Gary Anderson after that loss to Minnesota, leading many to wonder if any of his assistants or the coordinators are on the hot seat. Well, some of those coaches responded to that statement by Gary Anderson this week.
Most of our in-game goals we didn't achieve, and so that's myself as a coordinator, us as a coaching staff, and our players from an execution standpoint. Just not a lot went well, so we've got to go back to the drawing board and a lot of things to correct out here, practice and get right, and we've got to do it in a short period of time.
He's critical. He's not going to sugarcoat anything, or I mean, we're all men. We all chose this profession. We understand what's in front of us every single week. But I think he's here to help us, and he's here to help the kids. And at the end of the day, that's his main focus, as it is every one of our assistant coaches' focus, is doing what's best for these players and putting them in the best situation possible to go out there and have some success.
And And to discuss all things Beavers, we're bringing in Mike Parker from Corvallis. Mike, listening to what the assistant coaches had to say, what Gary Anderson had to say this week, what's your take on kind of whose fault it is?
Amanda, that's a fair question. Gary, the comment about I'm the one that hired the coaches and so on, I know has gotten a lot of play. He said that in the immediate aftermath of the Minnesota loss and that painful second half. And the sense I've gotten, and I've talked to almost every assistant coach this week in preparation for tomorrow's game against Washington State, and they all said they welcome being challenged. It's hard. You know, those are words spoken by Coach Anderson. You know, you heard T.J. Wood say he's critical. And he should be. And Gary, I think, has challenged all of his coaches. He's challenged himself. He's challenged all the players this week to be accountable, to step up, make no excuses, and go back to work in technique. The thing that Gary has with all of these coaches is long-term relationship, equity built up. He can say things that can be challenging to the media and the public, behind closed doors, in the film room. I think you're going to see coaches who've gone to work with great alacrity, conscientiousness, attention to detail. I think you'll see it play out. Win or lose, I think it'll be the best Beavers game completely from a coaching standpoint and an execution standpoint they've had this year tomorrow on the Palouse.
Now, speaking of that game, I mean, obviously they have a great offense under Luke Falk, but their defense is very good as well. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for them this weekend?
Well, Luke Falk has had great numbers. He's had a great career against almost all comers in the conference. The Beavers had some success against Luke last year, and for 2.5 quarters, Falk and the Cougs rallied from down 24-6 to win. Kevin Clune, the D coordinator, told me we had plays that we didn't make, that had we made them last year in key situations, getting off the field on third down, getting an interception in the end zone. So we just got to make those plays. Players make plays, players win games, the mantra for Coach Anderson. So I think defensively, you can't fully slow down Luke Falk and that offense forever, but I think the Beavers can do what Boise State did. They sacked him 5 times. The Beavers haven't had a sack this year. They've got to get a couple of those against him and disrupt his timing in that beautifully timed passing game that Leach has developed. And offensively, the Beavers showed some signs last week of getting Jordan Villeman involved. Seth Collins looks like he's going to make his debut, and the Beavers need him badly out of the slot. They'll run the ball better, I believe, against this defense than they have against other comers. So they need 60 minutes of football, and I think, again, they have a chance to go up and make this a very interesting game.
Obviously, Seth Collins was an exciting piece last season. How big of an impact do you think he can make right away? Because it has been some time since he's been out.
It has, but he's been champing at the bit. He's been engaged in practices, and he's ready to go. He's a difference maker. He made some plays in Pullman 2 years ago that were very special in terms of his athletic ability. He's a difference maker. He gives Alex Grinch, the outstanding D coordinator for Washington State, just one more piece to have to plan around. And with Collins and Togiai and Villeman and Isaiah Hodgins, and again with the running game loosened up because of what the Beavers can do with Collins now in the slot, complementing Villeman and Hodgins. Amanda, I think we'll see the offense that we've been waiting for to break through and break out in big ways this weekend.
Obviously, you've seen a lot of Pac-12 quarterbacks over the years, and there's a lot of good Pac-12 quarterbacks playing now. Where do you think Fox stacks up against the rest of the league, rest of the nation, and some of the others that you've seen over the years?
Falk has been amazing. There's no question. His numbers are amazing. But I think it's instructive, with no disrespect to Falk, who's chewed the Beavers up, no doubt. But Tyler Helinski went in relief and went 25 of 33 for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns. Falk has mastered the system. He gets the ball out to a variety of weapons and receivers in a brilliant way, not taking anything away from him. But we saw that Helinski can go in and have success. The system that Mike Leach has developed is a thing of beauty. And so as far as where he stacks up, I think he's got a shot to play in the league for a while. But Mike Leach's quarterbacks, generally speaking, have put up huge numbers because of the great system and their ability to master it. I think you look around the conference, there's probably some other guys that would be ahead of Luke in terms of their NFL prospects, even with the great numbers Luke has put up.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike. And we have you covered with 3 great Beaver shows every week here on CSN Talkin' Beavers. Wraps up the previous weekend's games every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Inside the Huddle with Gary Anderson Thursdays at 10. And of course, Go Beavs getting you ready for Saturday game day on Friday nights at 9. But right now, Evanston is taking you to the OSU Beaver store.
Hey Beaver Nation, this week we have Washington State Get With The Damn program with your damn t-shirts. Here we got the gray one, Damn Nation. Then we got the black one, Damn Proud Beaver Believer. Make your way to the OSU Beaver store. Fans start here.
Well, here's a look at the history between these two teams. The Cougars lead the all-time series 49-40-3. Biggest streak for the Beavs in the 60s. Biggest domination for Oregon State. 2008, they scored 66 points and beat them by 53. Time now for our Buster's Barbecue Q&A. And we're taking a closer look at not only the lack of pass rush by the defense, but also some of the O-line protection issues, right?
Yeah, and there's been quite a few issues with the offensive line. I mean, they haven't been able to keep Jake Luton clean. This first play, I want to really demonstrate why that is and why that's been happening. So in this first play, and this is again from the this last game with Minnesota, you see it's a 4-man rush over here. And basically what's going to end up happening here is that you have the offensive lineman, both the center and the guard, who have a hard time keeping their man in front of them. And just within 3 seconds, they are able to get to Jake Luton, and he's going to end up getting sacked. The guy that ends up sacking him is going to get a strip sack. And you could tell right now. So right now we're at 2 seconds, right? Yeah. So look how quickly they're able to get to him.
Yeah, right there.
Right there, strip sack, turnover. They have the ball in the red zone. They're able to score after that pretty quickly. So this next play right here is on the opposite side now. You have the defensive line of Oregon State. Here you're going to see they're going to actually use a blitz package in order to try to get to the quarterback. It's 3rd and 2. They don't get to him. He has literally like 4 or 5 seconds in order to get rid of the ball. Has more than enough time. He's able to find his receiver. He gets the receiver, and first down. So pretty quickly here, and you'll see exactly what I mean.
And this is a defensive front for the Beavers that has not recorded a single sack.
0 sacks in 3 games. 0 sacks in 3 games, which is a huge issue, especially when you're trying to, get to the quarterback and hopefully help that pass defense. And, the secondary is having some issues right now, and that has not been happening here. They've been having repeated, problems getting to the quarterback, and they have 0 sacks.
Any common thread when you're looking at these 3 games? Why haven't they been able to get any pressure?
They haven't been able to get a push. That defensive line in the middle on the defensive tackle, the nose tackle, they haven't been able to get the push in order to create that uncomfortability for the quarterback. And so they're able to get that free pocket there and just be able to deliver the ball, which has been a recurring issue.
And like we were talking about with Lindsay, that's going to be big. Obviously this weekend against Luke Falk, I imagine.
Absolutely, especially when you have a quarterback like him who's able to decipher where he wants to go with the ball and has been threading the needle every single time that he's been able to play against the Beavers. All
right, thanks, Jason. More to come here on Go Beavs. We're going to hand out our ingredients to victory, what has to happen for the Beavers to pull out a win. Well, Beavers going into the most dangerous few weeks of the season, particularly murderous row of the Pac-12 North. It all starts with Washington State tomorrow. The Cougars, 21-point favorites. That's probably a fair assessment. 3-touchdown favorites. Yes. Maybe not strong enough.
At the rate that Washington State scores, it could get out of hand really quickly. And we talked about this early in the season, and then we also saw it last week against Boise State, right? Yep. That absolutely. They're in every game till the end because of the style they play.
Sure. Yeah, and it's so easy for Washington State to score. So for me, I think Oregon State really needs to hold on to the ball as much as possible.
All right, we're going to get back to that. First, we've got some game predictions from around the CSN office. We're going to start with Owen from Outdoor GPS.
My prediction for the Oregon State game is going to have to be, unfortunately, Oregon State 17 and the Washington State Cougars 38. Hopefully the guys over at Talkin' Huskies have a better idea than what I have. Let's see what they've got to say.
Disappointing weeks, Beaver fans. You get Seth Collins back, a little different energy. You got to learn to play better football in the second half. However, 35-45, Cougars.
Wow, really? Cougs. Well, look, hey, all I know is the Beavers gave the Cougs all they could handle last year, and I think it'll be similar, but it's still in Pullman. So I got the Cougars winning 34-31. Hey, let's kick it over to the guys over the Go Ducks set and see what their thoughts are on this weekend's game. I'm sure they'll be very impartial.
Thanks, Nigel. Jordan Kent, Carson York, Don Pelham here for Go Ducks. And do they really want us to give a score prediction for the Beavers?
No.
They do realize what show this is. We're going to stay in our lane here, but Beavers taking on Washington. Any thoughts?
Hey, I want to first state this, that when I'm a Beaver fan when they play anybody but the Ducks, and I like to see them succeed. But I don't think Vegas has figured out how bad the Beavers are this year. Only a 21-point dog against the Cougs, 50-2, 7.
Is this in Beaverville?
This is in
the Coug?
I don't think it matters where it's at.
Well,
it's in Pullman, from what I'm told.
a little bit.
Okay, it's in Pullman, so a little bit sleepier than Corvallis.
Oh, boy, I tell you what, that's going to be a tough game.
We'll just leave it at that.
I can't call it.
Game. Amanda, back to you.
I certainly hope we get to throw out our predictions for all of these games.
For what it's worth, I would just like to remind Carson York and Don Pelham that the Beavers are the ones that won in the Civil War last year, not the Ducks.
Very good point.
Exactly.
Very
I feel like that kind of gets lost.
Thank you.
Things can still get fixed by November, maybe.
Okay, so now we're going to break down what has to happen for the Beavers. We're giving out our Papa John's ingredients to victory. Lindsay, we'll start with you.
Okay, I said last week, that Jake can't throw any interceptions. How about just the offense stop turning the ball over in general? Awful. I was driving up to the Oregon State game on Saturday against Minnesota, and Mike Parker comes on with this horrible stat. In the first 10 quarters, they had 10 turnovers. That is brutal. And then also got to establish the run early, often, go to null.
Yeah, and I agree. You have to establish the run. You have to be able to keep the ball away from the Wazoo offense, number one. Number two, you have to pressure, you have to pressure Falk in order to, make him uncomfortable so he doesn't have his receivers open all the time, and so he could sack him, get one sack at least maybe this game.
They have zero still.
They have zero still, so hopefully
what happened
they can
to
do
30
that.
sacks and 30 takeaways?
Yeah, you kind of forget about that, right? Those big goals. Now we're just hoping to maybe get one or two. And Jason, you were saying time of possession. That's going to be huge with the way they score.
It's a huge thing because
killing them this year.
So here's a pretty important stat, at least for me. So last year they were able to have the ball for half the game, so 30 minutes. This year so far they've only been able to have the time of possession for 23 minutes, which means that the other offensive team has been having the ball more often, and also that also means on the return that the defensive squad for the Beavers has been tired.
And also, when Oregon State has the ball, they tend to be giving it away, which is not good either.
True. We want to keep it. We want to hold on to it. All right, well, we will see you back here next Wednesday for a new edition of Talkin' Beavers. We'll be wrapping up all the action from the Washington State game. Hopefully has some more positives for you. We'll see you then.